Protests on the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina. Police still have not released video of the shooting of Keith Lamont Scott, but today, NBC News obtained video from Scott's family that offers a tragic, gut-wrenching look at what transpired on that fateful Tuesday. The video was taken by Scott's wife, who was heard telling police her husband has a traumatic brain injury. She pleads with her husband to obey authorities and pleads with the police not to fire. We don't see the shooting itself, we only hear it, but that makes this footage no less disturbing. We're going to play some of it for you right now.
Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He has no weapon. He has no weapon. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything. He doesn't have a gun. He has a TBI. He's not going to do anything to you guys. He just took his medicine. Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, don't you do it. Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? He better not be dead. He better not be dead. We're over here at 94 53 Lexington Court. These are the police officers that shot my husband, and he better live. He better live, because he didn't do nothing to them.
Frightening. You watch that, you cannot react other than your stomach gut-wrenching. Unfortunately, Margaret, we've seen too many of these, whether it's weekly or monthly. How does this latest infuse into the national dialogue, up the dialogue, and particularly as we're heading into Monday night's debates?
You have so many elements at play, and this is already having a major impact. Let's set the presidential implications aside just for a second. It's impossible not to be moved by the sound and the images that you see in that video. If you go back to Ferguson and then go more recently to Dallas and then move to this, you see this continuum, and every time there's a national dialogue, a debate about it, calls for reconciliation and healing and understanding, and we're redirected toward another incident like this. But it has the potential to unite or the potential to divide. It has the potential to turn people out, has the potential to turn people off, and that's, I think, what we will take shape in the next few days. You
know, when you're a parent, you tend to lens everything through that. I was watching an interview with Brian Gumbel, being interviewed by Charlie Rose, and he said to Charlie Rose, it's not fair that my son has a dramatically higher chance of being stopped or being killed every time he leaves the house. That's a reality. That's a reality every black man lives with. On the flip side, you have police officers in the heat of the moment. My grandfather's a police officer. In the heat of a moment, the Tulsa situation, very different situation. I mean, this poor guy has his hands up. You just cannot believe you're watching it. Here, unfortunately, you don't see what's going on. What you do take away in listening to his wife, you get the sense the man was ill in some way. We obviously talked about traumatic brain injury, and she was calm at one point. When she was saying to her husband, don't get out, she almost didn't seem that concerned, and then obviously she heightened. There's more to come. Obviously, we're going to need to see the police video. The police camera was not on the actual shooting police officer, who was African-American. It was on a different police officer. We haven't seen that yet, so there's still more to come. Just a situation that does not have a simple answer.
Okay, but Donnie, so now we do look toward Monday, and we look toward that first debate, we look toward the presidential election. What do you think the implications are going to be on that level? You know,
I think it's interesting. Hillary Clinton is going down to Charlotte this weekend. I think you hate to politicize any event, but that's what we're doing here. I think this dramatically, I don't want to say helps Hillary Clinton because it's even the wrong choice of word, but plays into who she is as a candidate. You know, if you see everything that's happened, every time there was a terrorist attack, Donald Trump, the first, or the horrible, horrible attack in Orlando, Donald Trump was, yeah, I was right. You know, thanks for the congratulations on I was right. And even the other day, his comment about stop and frisk. Talk about throwing kerosene on a situation. Now, forget that stop and frisk has been ruled unconstitutional by a federal judge. Forget that it has not even worked. But to not have the understanding, to not have the unification gene in your brain, the empathy gene in your brain, to know that is not the moment, even if that's what you believe in, to throw that in there. So to me, he is an igniter, and Hillary Clinton is much more of a unifier, so I think this plays much more to her.
I think it does have the potential, certainly, to galvanize this debate, and we'll put him on the spot about those questions, right? But Hillary Clinton's problem and concern has always been in states like North Carolina and Florida, can you turn out the African American vote? If this is a galvanizing incident that turns out that vote, because people feel that it matters who is elected, that's one thing. If it just makes people feel disaffected, right, and feel that it makes no difference whatsoever, if these problems happen under Barack Obama, wouldn't they happen any other president? It could be problematic, actually, counterintuitively for him.
Obviously, the big issue has been who's got the electorate right in the polling. And obviously, where is that African-American vote? They are not emotionally, enthusiastically turning out for Clinton. We know that. There's a big concern. This could be their cause célèbre. This could be the thing that galvanizes, you said, that entire community, obligates. I know that if I'm a leader in the African-American community, if I was somebody that was on the fence about voting, this gets me out to vote. This is personal. This is emotional. This is real. So both in the debate forum, but more importantly, in the get out the vote thing, which is really going to decide this election, what that electorate ends up looking like. To me, this could be a galvanizing moment for the entire Democratic Party. You hate using the word galvanizing with something like this, but yes.
Doesn't matter what the video shows, if any of the videos are conclusive.
You know what? We've seen, the reality is when you put this with Ferguson, when you put this with Tulsa last week, this is a problem that African Americans live with every day. This is, us white folk, we can empathize, but we can't feel it. And I think that it is such a core, primal, self-survival issue that I do think this will drive people out. Okay, coming up, we'll talk about this and more, but first a word from our good sponsors.
I've said this repeatedly. Police have a really tough job. Typically, they're interacting with somebody who, for whatever reason, is not looking forward to interacting with the police. On the other hand, if you have repeated instances in which the perception is at least that this might not have been handled the same way were it not for the element of race, even if it's unconscious. I think it's important for all of us to say we want to get this right. This should be a source of concern for all Americans.
That was President Obama in an interview that aired on Good Morning America this morning. With us now is Ben Jealous. He's the former president and CEO of the NAACP, and he joins us from Baltimore. Ben, thanks for being with us.
Sure. Glad to be here.
It's impossible not to begin our conversation with the video that is out today and making news. And I want to talk to you about the debate. I want to talk to you about the presidential race, but I want to ask you first your reaction to the video and how you think that this will impact the days ahead.
You see a very courageous woman trying to save her husband's life, even as she's trying to video it, fearing that the worst may happen. It's in the tradition of Mamie Till and so many other women who have courageously shown the world what they did to my son, what they did to my husband, what they did to my brother. And it's, I think it's helpful. I mean, look, we have to be clear that we're living through a moment of disruption, a moment when video, dash cam video, uniform video, and cell phones is showing the world what the black community has known for centuries, which is that men with badges, women with badges can get away with killing us and have. Small numbers of police officers, relatively small percentage of the overall force, has gotten away with killing huge numbers of black men for a very long time. Unarmed, innocent black men. And sometimes they're armed and they're innocent. I mean, this is a country in which we believe in the right to bear arms. Just simply having a gun doesn't mean that the police get to kill you. And ultimately, I think there's reason to hope that we will come to a better place as a nation, but it will be a very painful road getting there. I think for us in the black community, there is, I think there's reason to hope that perhaps this road we've been on for centuries, this piece of this road may be coming to an end sooner than it would have without this technology, but that will still be an unacceptably long time from now if history is a guide.
There are two other stops on that road. One is the first presidential debate Monday. The next is the election November 8th. Of course, candidates will all be reluctant to do anything that looks like directly politicizing this tragedy, but it will nonetheless certainly be an issue. If you're asking a question on Monday's debate to both candidates, to both nominees, what's your question? And what do you think beyond the debate, you want to hear them each talking about?
Look, I think I would ask them for their most courageous plan, for their boldest plan. Donald Trump has been selling a fear across this country, passing off fear as courage, and it's dangerous. It's one of the reasons I think why so many people can't stomach voting for him, simply because, even if they're somewhat sympathetic or they don't like the other candidate, simply because they fear what his finger on the nuclear weapon might do. But the reality is that he will have have cops with their foot on the neck of black and brown men across this country. He's sitting there, shilling Rudy Giuliani's old snake oil of racial profiling, which has been proven again and again not just to be a failure, but to inflame tensions and to undermine basic policing. One of the interesting things about New York City is that not only was racial profiling wildly ineffective. 90% of the people stopped had no infractions. 99.9% did not have a weapon, even though it was sold as a way to get weapons off. But during that period, what you saw was that the homicide case solve rate, the rape case solve rate went down. In other words, it turns out that racial profiling isn't just if you will, a weapon of mass destruction as far as the lives of the people who are impacted when they're humiliated by the cops in that way. It's a weapon of mass distraction for the officers themselves, and actually keeps them from doing their job and important tasks like getting killers off the street, getting rapists off the street, because they're sitting there, frisking innocent people.
Ben, it's Donnie Deutsch. It's proven that stop and frisk has not worked. My stomach turned when I watched that. I'm a progressive guy. Let me play the role of possibly a Trump supporter who watches that, and I'm generalizing here, who says, well, here's a guy that has a rap sheet. I'm talking about the victim, Mr. Scott. Here's a guy that had been in jail for shooting someone. Here's a guy that possibly was reaching for his weapon. This cop, who is African-American, is trying to do his job. This is not about race. This is about a heat of a moment situation. Obviously, the Tulsa situation was completely different. I'm lensing it through those eyes. If I'm a red state guy, for instance, respond to that.
Jesse Jackson years ago said it's a sad day when you look over your shoulder when you're walking in the dark streets of Washington, D.C., when he was shadow senator, and you hear somebody walking up behind you, and you look over your shoulder, and you're and you're glad it's not a black guy. And the reality is that what he was referring to is that in this country, even we as black people, you know, it's like if you live amongst smog, you get soot in your lungs. If you live amongst racism, your mind gets warped. And we start to equate color with danger when it has nothing to do with it. We have to focus on is behavior. And so
I'm actually taking color. My point is, Ben, I'm trying to take color out of it from a guy that's not lensing it from as an African-American father or a very progressive guy.
But what I'm saying is that, no, I get it. But what I'm saying is that black officers can have their sense of danger racially coded in just the same way that a white officer can. That ultimately what you think of people doesn't have to do with your own skin color as much as it has to do with your own mind.
But couldn't I look at that video, Ben, couldn't I look at the video and go, race maybe had nothing to do with it right there? They didn't pull that guy over. This was a situation. I'm not. By the way, we continually watch black men get shot, so I'm not an idiot. I'm just giving the counter argument.
Yeah, no, brother, I don't think that you're an idiot. I'm sorry if it's coming across that way. What I'm saying, man, is that, is that just because it's a black officer and a black victim doesn't mean that race has nothing to do with it.
No, I'm saying, let's say it was a white officer even. If it was a white officer, sometimes, unfortunately, in the heat of the moment, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with either a heat of the moment
what I would say is roll the tape on the similar cases where a white man has been killed. Find me those cases. Because we don't see them. And if, and that's just it, right? Every time that we hear that a child, like a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old has been handcuffed for no apparent reason in a school, why is it always a black kid? And every time that we hear that an unarmed American man has been shot by the police, or one who wasn't doing anything that you should be shot for, Johnny Crawford buying a Red Ryder a BB gun, a Red Ryder BB gun.
Ben, you appreciate converted here. Ben, we got to go. Ben, we got to go.
All right,
we appreciate your time, my friend. All right.
Ellis, thank you. Coming up, we'll talk about the presidential debate on Monday and the issues the candidates will likely discuss. We'll be right back.
Donald Trump today picked up the endorsement of his one-time nomination rival, the man who was booed during the Republican convention and who Trump vowed to start a super PAC to vanquish from electoral politics, and that is, of course, Ted Cruz. In a Facebook post, Cruz said, quote, after many months of careful consideration, of prayer and of searching my own conscience. Wow. I've decided that on Election Day I will vote for the Republican nominee. Obviously doesn't mention his name. But with the first presidential debate 3 days away, a new national poll by the AP suggests Trump still has a lot of work to do. That AP survey has Hillary Clinton ahead of Trump by 6 points. She's up 45 to 39 among likely voters. It also says more than half of the country fears a Trump presidency, and only about a third of Americans believe he is somewhat qualified to be in the White House. Clinton-Trump could not be more polar opposite in the ways they're preparing for the big debate. Clinton has hunkered down most of this week, holding mock debates, studying the issues, and drafting a psychological profile of Trump to find ways to get under his skin. And Trump has preferred the campaign trail to debate class. He's scheduled a rally in Virginia tomorrow, and in the New York Times put it today, is essentially approaching his prep sessions, quote, like a big man on campus who thinks his last-minute term paper will be dazzling simply because he wrote it. How do they know how he approached college? Margaret, let's start with Trump. Okay, let's kind of do a little war games here. What do they each have to do on Monday? Let's start with Trump.
Okay, so, like, remember, Trump is actually still behind in most places, we think, according to polls. So he's going to do two things. Number one, he has to assure people or put to rest people's expectations that he's kind of like a wild card or, too unpredictable or whatever. He has to come across as more statesman-like, enough to make people more comfortable. And he has to knock her off her game. And so the big question, of course, is like, is he going to aggressively do that, or is he going to try to not do that aggressively? Because that would backfire on him, right? So that's a balancing act for him. And for her, she has to attempt to poke holes or rebut or refute everything he says that's either an exaggeration, a lie, not true, provably not true, unanswered, never answered before, while not sounding all the ways that have hurt her in months past, shrill or humorless or, unapproachable, that sort of stuff.
I actually think he has the easier path, because if you take basically what have been what I call the two dial issues for both candidates, we have an untrustworthy, unlikely, but competent candidate versus a potentially dangerous, imbalanced, possibly racist, but change candidate. She cannot, in 90 minutes, all of a sudden become likable or trustworthy. That's baked in. He, if you're waiting for his head to spin around and him to spit out pea soup, if all of a sudden he just does not explode and his temperament is right on, he gets presidential points doing for just what anybody else would do. And if he says something that's not hateful, if you come away from that going, yeah, I guess maybe he could, he wins. She's got a much higher bar. What she's got to do with him, she's got to prick him. What we're going to see also is a man and a woman face-to-face. We haven't seen this before. Trump howls at the moon and screams out, I hate this one, that one's bad. He does it on a stage with 16 people. He does it with 10,000 people. Now he's facing a large 6'3" man is facing a woman. And if she can prick him, not throw the first bomb, but get him. We got strange crew people there. And get him to attack, get him to be belligerent towards her. That's going to play very badly for those Carter voters, those suburban women voters in Washington, in Philadelphia. And if I'm her, I'm going to rope-a-dope, jab, jab, get him to throw the first punch.
It sounds so easy. Why, what's the problem, right? Okay, but so there's always pressure on debate moderators. But given this year the candidates on stage and their historic unpopularity, NBC's Lester Holt will be under particular scrutiny for the questions and the follow-ups he asks, and also how he handles questions and answers that are, shall we say, loose with the facts. What does Holt have to do Monday?
You know, there's a lot of debate. Do you check, do you not check? Matt Lauer was in an impossible position because he wasn't really an interviewer. He wasn't really a moderator. He's the best, and that was a tough situation he was put in. Lester now, the lights are going to be underneath him. I actually think it is beholding to both candidates to be the moderator themselves. If you're Hillary Clinton, you cannot be waiting. You cannot be depending on. You can get another Crowley situation where that interviewer, that moderator, excuse me, cannot be badgering 2 and 3 times. That's going to be up to each one of them to say, liar, liar, pants on fire. I said an interesting thing this morning, hopefully it was interesting on Morning Joe. I said, Hillary, at some point, because she'll say you're lying, and he's going, no, I'm not. She should say, all right, everybody at home, Google. Right now, 100 million people, let's all Google together. And I think we do have that ability because he just blatantly lies and just is not called on it. So it's going to be up to her and not Lester Holt.
Who's the pressure on those? I guess more on her rather than Lester Holt, since she's actually trying to win a race, right?
It isn't, because she does not lie. I mean, well, we've seen instances where, in terms of, as far as the email, she was not forthcoming and she actually did lie. But on a day-to-day basis, as part of her campaign DNA, it's not in there. He has actually used lying as a strategy. It's fascinating. He'll just say it. He'll leave it out there. I did not, vote for the war in Iraq. We could take their oil. Of course we could take their oil, and it stays. So she needs to be a prosecutor. She needs to, in a very calm, deliberate way, say, Donald, that's silly. We all know that's silly. Can you stop? That's just not shrill. Just say, Donald, that's a lie. That's silly. Be a mama bear. Be a school teacher. Catch him that way.
But so what if she throws, does he throw a bomb at her? Is there a wild card moment?
I think the wild card moment for him is he out of nowhere is going to throw a Molotov cocktail. Like, Hillary, by the way, I know your husband was unfaithful, but his best friend is, or one of his really good friends is a convicted pedophile. Are you an enabler of that? It's like, huh? What? Huh? That kind of thing to throw. I'm talking about this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. He's been on his plane 80 times. Now, I'm not saying in any way that's the case, but throw an incredibly unfair, crazy non sequitur at her to really get her off her game.
Don't you want to know how she's prepping for that?
Yeah,
I do.
And the other thing I would, Nicole Wallace said this morning, it was brilliant. I wanted him to do this 2 months ago, but if he starts off the debate and says, look, first of all, I just want to apologize. I want to apologize to the cons. I want to apologize to this woman. It's been sticking with me for a long time.
That could be the wild card.
I mean, whoa. He does that, and obviously it's transparent, and actually it's a bit. But you're Hillary Clinton, and
what do you do?
What do you do?
No, what do you do?
I mean, that I always said he should have apologized a month ago, but to do it opening the debate, and Nicole brought this up this morning, would be brilliant.
Okay, so she is not sort of known for her impromptu gamesmanship as much, but can you imagine that there would be a reverse wild card moment where she springs something just totally out of left field on?
You know, look, if either one of them have a bomb, it's going to happen either that night or 6 or 7 days before the election. So, you know, it would be interesting if she came forward. But if she just prosecutes the facts, and I don't mean facts being, you know, what's the capital of Syria, but facts like, no, we can't go into a country and pillage their oil, and no, we can't build a wall. That's a silly thing to say. That's not going to happen. And explain why in a very, very cogent way. That will seem very, very, very presidential. She wins if she rattles him at all. If he attacks her, he loses.
There you have it.
There you have it. And
Coming
I
up.
certainly know what I'm talking about, so it has to go exactly.
So it must be right.
It has to be exactly as I'm saying.
Coming up, a longtime debate prep guru joins us here on set. We'll be right back.
Joining us now is Brett O'Donnell, a man who knows a thing or two about debate prep. He's helped Mitt Romney, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and many others prepare for their big debate nights. And he joins us now from Washington, D.C. Brett, I want to first start with a clip from the 2007 Republican primary debate in Michigan and a memorable moment from one of your candidates, John McCain.
Senator Clinton tried to spend $1 million on the Woodstock Concert Museum. Now, my friends, I wasn't there. I'm sure it was a cultural and pharmaceutical event. I was tied up at the time, but the fact is...
Oh, that was a good one, Brett. Thanks for being with us. Brett, I read something you wrote where you said you don't win an election in a debate, but you sure can lose one. Can you explain that in 400 words or less?
Well, debates are part of the overall campaign narrative, and so I don't think winning a debate will equal winning the election. But certainly performing poorly in a debate can cost you the election, and there are some examples in the past to show that. So, you know, Gerald Ford comes to mind proclaiming that there was no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe. There have been some others, and so you have to make sure you perform well and win, because you can change the overall narrative of the campaign, give yourself momentum, which can help you getting to Election Day. But these debates, I think, will be the most monumental, the most impactful on the campaign narrative, because they'll be the most watched, and because there are so many unanswered questions about these candidates that the audience is going to bring to viewing the debates.
Brett, there's anywhere between 3 and 10% of undecided voters. The rest are locked in. You couldn't have two more polar opposite candidates. In one thought to each candidate, if you were going to woo those 3 to 10% undecideds at that point, Donald Trump, you need to say this to them. Hillary Clinton, you need to say this to them.
Yeah. Donald Trump needs to show that he can pass the commander-in-chief test. I think Donald Trump needs to come in with the kind of temperament that he had in the exchange over New York values with Ted Cruz. If that Donald Trump shows up and shows that he can pass that commander-in-chief test, that he's competent on issues, then I think that he'll have a good night and Hillary will have a long night. Hillary Clinton needs to show she's got a vision for how she'd move the country forward. Her campaign just can't be not Trump. It's got to be I'm for something. This is how I would take the country forward. And she's got to up her game on the presentation side. Donald Trump's been doing TV for years. Hillary Clinton has been erratic in these debates, in my opinion, some good, some bad. I liken her to Al Gore in 2000, when Al Gore came in, sky-high expectations, sitting vice president, had been a senator. She comes in, former Secretary of State, former state senator, ran for president already, a former senator from New York. So she's got sky-high expectations. She has to find her voice to make sure that she delivers a consistent performance across all 3 debates, or it's going to hurt her.
So, Brett, if you're writing in the Woodstock line for Hillary Clinton, what has she got to work with? Kind of like what's her wheelhouse? What's available to her?
Well, with Donald Trump, she's been going after him on his temperament. So she's got to prove the claim. She's been making the claim that he doesn't have the temperament to be president and he doesn't talk to women the way he should. She's got to bait him into showing that temperament that's not capable of being presidential. For Donald Trump, he's got to stay on offense without being offensive. He's got to make sure that that he can go after her on substantive issues without crossing the line and making it intensely personal, because in debating a woman, he'll be held to a higher standard. So as she'll be held to a higher standard as well, she can't cross that line either, because overly aggressive women, unfortunately, according to gender communication studies, are judged poorly. But he's also got to walk that line as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle each other, which Donald Trump, which Hillary Clinton shows up to these debates.
I think you're right. It's really interesting, the psychology of how Americans perceive a woman or expect a woman to act. Is difficult to poll, but we know there's differences. Does humor work with women? Like, do people want to see jokes or funny stuff? I don't know if you got a chance to see Hillary Clinton do the Between Two Ferns skit, right? But
I did.
Would the same joke work if a woman told it? If a woman's affable and she's running for president, or if she's like, ha ha, like how does that What plays and what doesn't play?
Well, I mean, I think for Hillary, she's got to improve her likability numbers. And that's been a problem for her. Even back in 2007, 2008, in her debates with Barack Obama infamously called her likable enough. That was off of a question about what was a perceived personality problem. And so that's the problem she has to cure. She has got to be able to connect with voters in the heart. She's very good at connecting with their heads. She knows policy, but she's got to connect with their heart. Donald Trump at times has been very good at connecting with the heart. He's got to make sure he can connect with the head. He's got to make sure that he knows policy well enough that he can carry forward a 90-minute debate. I liken him to a band that's got a great, song, one-hit wonder, but you go to their concert wondering if the rest of their music is any good. He's got to show up to make sure he can say, hey, look, I am substantive enough on these issues that surrounded by the right people, I can handle the job.
Brett, he actually thinks he's just going to stay with his own game because obviously there, or at least according to all the reports, there has not been a lot of prep. So to his credit, he's, look, this is who I am. I'm showing up that way. And Hillary is very on brand. She's got her nose in the books. And as you said, it'll be interesting if either one of them can drift a little out of their lane. Brett O'Donnell, thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we'll break down the TV ad wars next. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM, and we will be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Last night, Hillary Clinton released a powerful new ad called Mirrors that's going to be running in 7 key battleground states and on national cable. Take a look.
I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. She's a slob.
She ate like a pig. A person who's flat-chested is very hard to be a 10.
Does she have a good body? No. Does she have a fat? Absolutely.
So you treat women with respect?
I can't say that either.
All right, good.
Lucky us, we have our ad man, the legend Donnie, standing by to break this down. Donnie, what do you think about that
Legend
ad?
in my own mind. First of all, as a dad of 3 daughters, I'd want to punch him in the face after that ad.
Yeah, but how do you really feel?
It's incredible. I think the Clinton campaign has run fantastic ads. And basically, they have to set him up as hateful and dangerous, okay? Make it a moral imperative for people to vote against him. If you are a woman, if you are a mother, and you see that ad, you go, wow, because those are his words. Those, you know, obviously they're taking it was Rosie O'Donnell, but those are his words. And, you know, there is something so gut and so visceral about that. And if you're a man, it hits you in a very, very different spot. So they've done an ad with children watching TV, I think incredibly effective. And it goes back to also, it's no coincidence they broke that ad 3 days before the debate, because they believe that Trump going at Clinton thing, man attacking woman, could be a real silver bullet that kills him, and they're teeing that up.
Do you think there's a subtle reference to Rick Lazio and sort of the original debate where Hillary Clinton, once upon a time in a different role as a different sort of candidate, you know, kind of, it was a pivotal point.
I think they're hoping they get a Lazio moment,
Yeah.
of course, where Lazio came and waved that thing in his face. But there is the trick, once again, what that ad hits, you basically, you have to disqualify him, because people are, there's an ad term called permission to believe. People would love to believe Trump. Anybody wants change. Everybody wants something new. This is not working. That's an easy one. And you just have to make that yearning for change. You have to disqualify it. Well, I can't. I just can't look myself in the mirror. I can't look at my kids in the mirror. And it's very, very effective.
It affects white voters, too, don't you think? I mean, there are so many ways that she's trying to turn out minority voters, and that's important also, but she's got a real weakness with many sort of subgroups of white voters, some of them men, some of them lesser educated white voters. Do you think that might be an appeal on that level also?
Absolutely. And once again, every election usually comes down to the suburban moms, and without question, they vote risk averse. So they see this ad, then they see the other ad that has Trump talking about, you know, I'm going to bomb the hell out of them, ends with a nuclear weapon. Everything is aimed at hitting primal nerves in individuals, in parents, saying the world can end. Your daughter could get, what kind of behavior is going to happen in the schoolyards as a result of that? That's the thing that concerns me most about a Trump presidency, beyond all the politics, is the way we're setting up proper behavior for our country. If he gets elected, you're basically saying to young boys, it's okay to be a bully. You're basically saying to somebody, it's okay to point to a Muslim and go, you might be the problem. You are endorsing that behavior. And that culturally, beyond politically, that morally, to me, is the most offensive and also the most powerful tool to use against him.
Now let's take a look at Donald Trump's latest ad. It was released on Tuesday. It's going to run on national cable and select broadcast.
It's a movement, not a campaign. Its leader, Donald Trump, builder, businessman, success, doing what others called impossible. Donald Trump's priority? You. Dreaming big, building bigger, united for family, jobs, country, defined by freedom. Standing together, pushing ahead, leaving the past behind, changing our future. Together, we'll make America great again.
So, Donnie, that was like a really different ad, wasn't it?
Trump's been surprisingly going positive. I mean, that's a Reagan Morning in America ad. I mean, that is, we are America. You have every buzzword in there. You have freedom. You have big. You have tomorrow. I thought it was very smart using that Bill and Hillary imagery.
That's the moment, isn't it?
That brings you back to the 90s. That just brings you.
The Monica, what did it bring you back to?
It was just the two of them doing that. I think
is she baking cookies?
It was
What's
the
happening
60 Minutes interview. It's just like, you look at that, and even if you like the Clintons, you go, yuck, I don't want to go back there. I find fascinating is the spend, where basically Hillary Clinton has been, I think, outspending 25 to 1. Wow. Now, here's the interesting thing. Trump has money now, but he's not spending it. And I think strategically, what they're waiting for, and I don't think it's dumb, I actually think it's smart, is going to start with the debate, hopefully start to move the discussion, and then for 10 or 20 days as we get towards the election, blitz based on one thing. I think they have an ad strategy that's not that. This is kind of just what I'll call like a weave and bob, a little head fake, if you will, because there's very little money going against it. I think you're going to see the real Trump campaign, whatever that's going to be, very, very targeted, very, what we call very high, in a very, very, very high rating point kind of thing, saturating a market, because he's got the money and he's not spending it.
And it really doesn't have like that sort of guttural impact that Clinton ad does.
That's not Roger Ailes, and that's not Bannon, and those are the guys running the ship there, and they're crafty guys. They're dangerous, but they're crafty, and that's not their handiwork. I actually think they're teeing that up there.
It's there. You think that's in the
back
look
pocket. At this. Look at this pretty red toy over here. I think that's what's coming. Come maybe the third week of October.
But if it's you, the timing of.
By the way, in this show, you get the great insights. Like, here's what's coming. we go so deep and in depth. You can't get that in-depth analysis anyplace else.
You can get it, but not with like the actual.
Not with the mnemonic device.
Not with the throw. Coming up. Coming up, we will talk about that Ted Cruz endorsement and more with our amazing reporter on the Trump beat after this.
Kevin Cirilli is our Bloomberg Politics Trump reporter, and he bought a new suit today, so we had to show it off. Do you want to talk a little bit about the suit? Is it?
You know, actually, it's now a couple of days old.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you.
Very dapper, very dapper.
I appreciate that, Donnie.
Okay,
that was a lot coming from you.
It was in the prompter.
It was in the prompter.
This was the hijinks team at the WADR.
You know, Margaret, I know this came from you.
Let's get right into it. So Trump announced today potential Supreme Court justice appointees, one of them being Mike Lee. If I am on the Ted Cruz side of the party and I'm looking at this, the right side, how do I feel? And I'm at the more moderate side. And if I'm a Democrat, how do I feel looking at this?
Well, these are conservative picks, right? And Senator Mike Lee, who, by the way, is best political friend with Ted Cruz, who just came out and endorsed Donald Trump earlier this afternoon. I think you cannot separate those 2 points. But this, again, is Donald Trump saying to the conservative base, saying to Ted Cruz supporters, look, you may not like me, you may not be excited by my candidacy, but on policy issues, if you want a president who's going to appoint conservative Supreme Court justices, you've got to vote for me.
Let's go back to the debate. Clearly, he's running around. He has not got his head in the books, nor would he be able to. I'm not a clinician, but like me, he's got ADD. I don't think he could sit down and focus on it. So is the campaign at all concerned they're going to get that question about a city in Syria where he just is like, huh, what? You know, Hillary Clinton is obviously very smart, and even if it doesn't come from the moderator, she's going to turn to him at one point and go, what do you think about city X? And he's going to stare. So are they concerned about that?
Donnie, they're going to try to avoid, they want to avoid that what's Aleppo Morning Joe moment, right? And that's really what Donald Trump is at risk for potentially on Monday at Hofstra. But the bottom line is this. The sources that I'm speaking with inside Trump world are telling me that he has been prepping for this for several weeks, and the way that he's doing it is in true Trump form. He's doing it in between campaign rallies on Trump Force One. He's having some top aides, whether it's Newt Gingrich, Rudy Giuliani. These are people that he's surrounded himself with who are having that back and forth conversation with him, quizzing him in a way, but he is going to hunker down on Sunday at Trump Tower and have a solid day of debate prep.
Crash for the exam.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, Can I just go back to the Ted Cruz thing? Because
Yes.
I got to say, maybe this is because I'm like off in Clinton land and easily distractible or something, but I was shocked. Right?
It took everybody by surprise, and there's no question that there is tension, but to say the least, between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. But there also, Margaret, as you know, is some significant interlocking of the Cruz world and the Trump world. Case in point, Kellyanne Conway. I mean, this is Donald Trump's campaign manager, who previously, before in this role, was running a Ted Cruz super PAC. And so you have, I think, a melding of the conservative minds. This helps get him a couple of news cycles. But to voters, Margaret, who don't like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, I got to be honest, I'm not sure Ted Cruz is really going to do
But he
much for
helps,
those
right?
I don't think I think this is not an endorsement election. I think, I think these candidates are so clearly defined and so polarizing that there is no one figure up there, certainly not Ted Cruz, that one way or another. And any establishment candidate that doesn't endorse him, he uses it to his advantage, and he has an established one that does. So I think it's kind of.
What does Ted Cruz want of this? I mean, it's not like he, is doing this because
maybe he thinks he's going to win.
Well, but that's
No, yeah,
it's not like he thinks that. It's not like based on his previous relationship with Donald Trump, like he thinks that this will mean that Mike Lee gets anything, or this will mean that Ted Cruz gets anything for that matter. And it's highly unlikely that he's changed his mind completely about everything. Is this an insurance policy so that Donald Trump doesn't go after him? Is this so that Ted Cruz can try to hang on to his own, re-election prospects? What is his goal here?
So if Donald Trump wins, I think that this definitely gives Ted Cruz some influence within a Trump administration. If Donald Trump loses, I think what this does is it attempts, and I'm not sure that it's going to work, to be candid with you, but I think it's an effort for Ted Cruz to win over and build a bridge with the millions of supporters who backed Donald Trump in a primary, and quite frankly, they chose Donald Trump over Ted Cruz in that primary, and everybody thought that those type of voters were going to go to Ted Cruz, and they didn't. They went to Trump.
What's Trump's worst nightmare for the debate?
The worst nightmare for the debate is that he has a "What's Aleppo" moment. That is that he has a viral moment that defines the rest of the 40-some remaining days that happens. The best case scenario is that he is able to reach out to those independent voters who, again, are displeased with the choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and that those voters take away from Monday night that this is a candidate who has continued to grow into his candidacy while Hillary Clinton has been defined by the past.
I actually think his nightmare moment is, I think he has an out even if he doesn't get the geography game, and his answer is, hey, look, I could hire somebody like you, Mrs. Clinton. You know what I mean? This is not what I do, but I don't think he has an out if the temperament thing goes off the hook. I think that's his nightmare, and he's a smart guy. He's not going to do it. I mean, if he does it, then my initial theory is he never wants to be president. He didn't want this in the first place, because all you have to do is not spit pea soup at her, and you'll look presidential.
Donnie, the point that I can just tell you right away is yesterday we were in my hometown of Philadelphia, and Donald Trump went to Geno's Steaks, and the reporters...
I'm a Jim's guy, by the way.
I'm actually a Tony Luke's guy.
Okay.
But the reporters, we were asking him questions, and he seemed poised that he was going to answer some questions from us. And one of the reporters shouted out a question about birtherism, and instead of engaging with us, as the old Donald Trump would have done, he walked right to the cashier to get a cheesesteak. So maybe some cheesesteak politics.
How much do we know about how the goading, the Clinton stand-in goading in the prep sessions, right?
They've said
that's her whole game.
There's been some reports about who's standing in for Hillary Clinton, but none of the sources that I'm speaking with have said that there is going to be a stand-in. I would just make another point. He wants to avoid the "What's Aleppo" moment, but he also wants to try to have the moment that he had against Ted Cruz back in one of the earlier debates in March, when he essentially responded to Ted Cruz's attacks on New York values. And that moment, I think, won him bipartisan support. And if he's able to confront Clinton in a way that shows that he has that more measured demeanor, I think that could be a good...
But it really was a different audience.
Oh, completely. And when you're going to get... I have a theory. I want you both to respond to it. I actually think it's going to be kind of a non-event. I think they're both smart. They're going to stay in their lanes.
Oh, I want my money back.
No, I think people are going to be... I don't want to turn viewers away. I actually think we might be a little underwhelmed. To both of their credits, that it's going to be, okay, we knew this, nothing new is going to happen here. I don't know if too much is going to move. I know
Donnie,
I'm in the minority.
We're political.
Me too.
I can't wait.
I'm not even watching football that night. I mean, that's how important this is.
Well, we should talk about that, shouldn't we, before we leave? I mean, What do you think? People are going to watch this game?
Oh no, 100 million. The last thing that did 100 million was the MASH at 83. This will do that. Okay, Kevin Cirilli, thanks. We will be right back. You're fantastic. If you haven't heard the big announcement, Bloomberg Politics is partnering with Twitter for special coverage of the presidential debate this Monday. There will be pregame and postgame interviews and analysis starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on ye old Twitter. Follow the Bloomberg's Politics Twitter handle. It's at @BPolitics. Coming up on Bloomberg West, Proterra CEO Ryan Popple, Mark and John are back on Monday. You won't have to sit through us anymore. Margaret, before we go, fun, right? Not so bad.
Yeah, I think we kind of rocked it.
Okay. We don't need those guys, do we?
Let's just keep going.
All right. Guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks for having us.